as we welcome Dr. Stephen Wendel for his presentation. My name is Robin Kriegelstein. I'm the founder of Action Design ATX some 6-7 years ago or something like that. But more exciting than that is we have the founder of Action Design Network itself, Dr. Stephen Wendel, who you may be able to see up there and who will be speaking tonight. Such a pleasure to welcome Steve. Is an amazing person who has been here since very early in the field, wrote a pioneering and seminal book on the subject of designing for behavior change, just as the world was beginning to start to be curious, how do we take all this behavioral science and find ways to apply it to the real world? How do we get really practical with it? Steve is the head of behavioral science for Morningstar. He's the author, as I mentioned, of Action Designing for Behavior Change, and now it's second edition coming out, and which includes some very exciting updates, including some from research that he's just recently concluded that he'll be telling us about. In particular, Steve has the kind of heart that we look for in this field, that this field is becoming known for. People who are trying to take insights about why humans and how humans behave strangely, and instead of trying to exploit those, instead look for how do we use that information to lift us all up? How do we empower humanity? How do we tackle the big problems? And for Steve's spearheading that and pioneering that for the world and carrying that message forward, I can't thank him enough, and very appreciative of the work that he does. Before we get going with him, I do need to note that we have sponsors for Action Design ATX here in Austin. Capital Factory has been our sponsor from the very beginning. It's the center of entrepreneurship for Central Texas, and an incredible model that's being emulated in more and more places around the country. They just an amazing organization. I encourage you, whether you're local or remote, to look into what they do. They've always provided us and many meetups with places to meet and an incredible amount of resources. And then also our organization, Live Neuron Labs, of which I'm the CEO and founder, has also sponsored this event since its beginning. So we are a design firm focused on designing for behavior change for social good. So without further ado, I will hand things over, spotlighting Dr. Stephen Wendel. Steve, welcome and thank you.
That is very kind, and it's good to see you all here today. I see some familiar faces, Emiliano and Ray and Matt, so it's good to see you all again. So yeah, as Robin mentioned, I want to talk to you today about behavioral design, what it means in practice. I've been doing this myself for about 12 years now at Morningstar and previous companies. And I've had the benefit over the years of talking to many other folks who are trying to figure this out. They're trying to figure out, what does it mean to apply behavioral science to help people take action in their products in a thoughtful way? And so today, I wanted to share some of those lessons, which, as Robin mentioned, I've recently brought together in the book Designing for Behavior Change. It's just came out in the second edition. And one of the things that we found as I both spoke to individual companies and we did a large survey of companies all around the world, is that in many ways, those who are just starting out and those who have been in the field a long time, we've converged on a blueprint. We've converged on really a common approach that we use, a problem-solving approach, to bring this wonderful body of research into practice and help build thoughtful, practical products, practical marketing, practical campaigns that help people take action. And so today I'm going to talk about that blueprint. I'm going to talk about what very many different groups all around the world have come together to develop. But for those of you who aren't as familiar with behavioral science, I thought I'd just give you a quick a little bit about BSci, about behavioral science. And then as we get into the details of what it means to help people take action, there is always that temptation to try to make them do what we want, not necessarily what's in the benefit of the end user. So I want to talk about how good, thoughtful people can sometimes stray, and how we all suffer from this, and how we can actually apply behavioral science to ourselves to help fix that. Now, there is time for Q&A at the end, but I always welcome comments throughout. So Robin will have the chat closed during the main part, but then he will turn it back on during the section break. So at the end of each of these 4 sections. So please feel free to type up your comments, any questions, share the experiences that you've had as well. All right, sound good? Nods? Anything? Okay, good. By the way, Carolina, that dinner looks great. Just so you know. That looks lovely. I just had a little food myself. So, all right. So for those of you who aren't familiar with behavioral science, kind of in its applied form, you may have come across books like Nudge, Predictably Irrational. You've learned about the BIT. And these give us a particular picture of what behavioral science is, which I have to say is incomplete. Now, I like to introduce what it really means for those of us in practice with the example of exercise, because just about all of us struggle with exercise in some form or another. So I'm sure many of you, either yourselves or have friends who have a gym membership. And before COVID, always thought they would go, and didn't quite go. Now we all have a great excuse. Or maybe you have exercise equipment at home or running shoes. And either you or your friend, you just never quite did it as often as you would expect, as you'd hoped, as you'd intended. And so what we find is that people don't get gym memberships or exercise equipment or running shoes, etc., because they simply want to spend the money. They don't do it because, hey, they're just altruistic, they want to give away. Instead, they believe sincerely that they're going to do this. The motivation is there. The intention is there. Even, some might call it hope, or simply the belief that they will take action, the sincere thought that this will happen. And yet, of course, gyms make money because we don't go. They know something we don't know. And that is our gap between intention and actions. In so many parts of our lives, whether it be exercise, whether it be saving for the future, sadly for many people, whether it's taking medication that we need regularly to stay healthy, there's this gap between what we want to do and what we actually do. There's a great study by James Choi at Yale that found that only 1/10 of people who made a declarative commitment, in this case it was for saving, I am going to save in the next 2 months. I need it. I know I know it's possible, and I'm going to do it. They had the benefit of administrative data. They found that only 10% of those folks actually followed through and did it. And so we see this not just in our daily lives, but we see this in our products. It's a product that I helped develop called Hello Wallet, where your users effectively will look you straight in the eye and say, absolutely, I'm going to buy your product. Absolutely, I'm going to use this new feature. That sounds awesome. All the user testing says wonderful things. Until, of course, it comes time for action. And so what behavioral science does is I think of it as 3 things. First, it gives us an understanding of why that happens, of why people do things that, yes, seem to be sometimes irrational, against their interest, against what they themselves say that they want to do. It gives us a set of tools to help people do better. That's what most people remember behavioral science as a bag of tricks, these magic wands we wave. It's not quite so simple. As you'll see, there are some powerful tools that we can use. And then finally, and the least sexy of all of it, the part that most people simply forget about, but is in fact the most important, is an understanding that we are wrong. Fundamentally, that we do not know how to change behavior, but instead that we have ways to try and to iterate and to learn over time. And part of that is it is essential that we test. Now, whether that testing be formal random experiments or whether that testing be a qualitative sense where you compare different groups, rigorously assessing whether we've in fact been successful given time, with the assumption that we aren't. These 3 come together to provide something that is unique and special. right? We find in psychology, we find in marketing practice, those tools have often been there, right? We find in understanding the mind a deep thoughtfulness about how people behave in the design community. But it's only really in bringing these three together to get the full power of behavioral science. And if you think of what is designing for behavior change or what is behavioral design, it's applying these lessons specifically to help people change behavior. And to do so in a way that isn't about coercion, isn't about even persuading people, but finding something they want to do and helping them take that action. Or, as you'll see, we also have techniques to help people stop, to stop smoking, to stop binging on potato chips. That's my problem. Whatever it might be, right? And so this approach is being applied all around the world. I mentioned that I've had the real joy and the luck of talking to many groups around the country and around the world in this space. And this comes from a survey that the Action Design Network, of which Robin is part of, and the Behavioral Science Policy Association and I ran to survey teams all around the world. We actually got about 40% of all known behavioral teams in the world to respond and give detailed information about what they're doing. And that's part of the book, and it's also, of course, part of the lessons that I'll be sharing today. And so we see such diverse applications as Uber's behavioral science team, which until recently was part of their data science team, and they looked at problems like why people absolutely hated Uber Pool and what they could do about it, why it felt so annoying to watch other people get picked up. It's funny psychology. There are tiny nonprofits. This is a group just down the street from me in Chicago that it's a small nonprofit. It helps young mothers at risk of homelessness get on a firm footing. 25 people. And they love behavioral science and they apply it to make the process easier for their clients, for the people they're serving. We see groups like System 1, which is a consultancy based in the UK, but all around the world, who's using behavioral science to promote different beer brands. Now, this is an example of them working, I believe, in Singapore, talking about how one beer brand might be more fluent, more come to mind more easily than others. Now, I'm not judging whether these are good or bad. It's rather showing you the scope of the field and where we have come just in the last few years. We see groups like this, Sura in Mexico, that apply behavioral science to help people save and tried a lot of different framings, different ways of framing the problem. We have groups like the Financial Conduct Authority of the UK, like many policy organizations, studying how to help everyday consumers pay attention to the risks they're undertaking when it comes in finance. And so what we see in behavioral science now is the sweep of application. The ways we're applying this around the world is really the whole sweep of business, the whole sweep of organizations. We find them in marketing shops, we find them in manufacturing, find them in big tech companies, we find them in tiny little nonprofits. All around the world, companies are doing this. And as I mentioned, they're doing something remarkably similar. So let me talk about what that is. What is this blueprint that I mentioned? So as I talked to Walmart, for example, Walmart uses an approach called the 4 Ds, which is, if I remember correctly, design is third. Define, design, decide, and then they scale up, and I don't remember the D for that. But they have an approach which is to identify the particular challenge that people are facing, try out a couple different techniques, and then see how they can grow it. Ideas 42 has a very similar process. They've tried a 4-stage, they've tried a 5-stage, but in the end, it's all the same thing. Whether it's new moms, whether it's Matt Wallard, who is the previous CBO of Clover Health, which is a health company, whether it's System 1, whether it's the IRS, all of these groups are effectively applying the same approach. Now, we have different names for the steps, but I like to synthesize just the beauty of work that's occurring all around the globe with this acronym DECIDE. Define the problem, explore the context of the users and what's going on with them, craft an intervention that helps them, implement a solution, determine the impact, and evaluate the next steps. That acronym, though I think it's kind of cool, is nothing special, and I want to be very clear about that. All across the world, we're doing a very similar thing, whether we call it DECIDE or not. We're understanding the user, we're understanding what we want to accomplish, we're seeing what is the way to connect those two, and then we're building the field and we're testing it, and then saying, how do we scale up? Now, what's special about this approach is not the acronym, though again, I think it's kind of useful if you're not familiar with the field. What's important are the tools we have along the way, is how we go from general problem solving to behavioral design. And this is where the richness really lies. This is where we structure a hypothesis for behavior change, thinking about what really matters in that behavioral intervention. So it's how we think about diagnosing the obstacles people face. And I'll share a framework called CREATE that helps you do that. How we map out the tiny steps and how it is often the smallest ones that cause us to trip rather than the big, absolute, do people love my product or not, etc. And so today I'm going to walk through some of those tools because that's the power. That's where you can really learn how to do this in practice for your company, for your organization, etc. Now, I'm not going to have time to go through all of it because there's such a bounty of tools that we have. But I do have a free workbook. Free, you just go to the website, you download it, no strings attached, where you can get all of the exercises I'm talking about today and a number of other ones, all the ones I just mentioned in the previous slide. Okay, you can get that at behavioraltechnology.co, just so you know. Okay, so let's do a sample problem. As you can probably tell, I really like exercise because so many of us struggle with that. We want to do it, but we don't. So let's say you are developing an app. You've been asked to develop an application which will help Joe here get off his lazy butt and go exercise. Okay, now let's say, just to make it a little more concrete, it's a B2B application. So you sell this, it's a benefit that you sell to companies, and the companies then provide it to their employees. I've actually known many such companies who have done exactly this type of application. And so you've been asked to go build an app that gets Joe off his butt and helps him exercise. The first thing naturally you should ask is, tell me a little bit more. Now, we have in the design community, in the product management community, different ways of writing up a project brief. Who you're working with, are you mobile, are you online, what is the business goals here, what's the time frame, etc. I want to narrow in on the particular part that's relevant for us, which is the behavioral problem. I think of it as really three things we need to identify. Who's the actor? Who are we trying to serve? Second, what are we trying to accomplish for that person? What is the outcome? And then finally, how do we think we can actually accomplish that, the action? Actor, outcome, action. Now, actually from Rajesh Nerlikar, who is in Austin now, I used to work with him, but I learned a nice way of formulating this. Do you know him, Robin, right? Cool. Yeah, so I learned from Rajesh the idea of structuring this as a hypothesis, okay? Which is, in the end, as I mentioned, behavioral science requires a certain humility. This stuff is bloody hard to really affect major change. And so we think about it as, okay, I'm going to try to help somebody change, but I don't know if it'll work. So let's not make it a statement, let's make it a hypothesis. In this case, let's say our actor is white-collar sedentary workers, right? Tech people, of which I've been most of my life, right? I want to help them start going to the gym, and that's going to help them, maybe for some people, to help them lose weight. But a more general is, okay, let's help them not have to go to the doctor so much. One of the big problems of weight, or even those of us who were born skinny as a beanpole, is a lack of exercise means joint problems, back pain, neck pain, etc. Right? And I know many of us who are now working from home have probably felt this in the ergonomics of our environment. And so by helping these folks, we think we can, if we help them start going to the gym, that will cause them to have less joint pain. That's a hypothesis. Right? And that's the key information we need that summarizes what we want to do. Now, often when we look at that action, right, sometimes it'll just be given to us in that brief. The product manager, the head designer, whatever will say, all right, go into the gym, that's your thing. But you may take a step back and say, wait a minute, is that really the right thing? Is the best way to help somebody exercise? Do they have to go to the gym? Why can't they do body weight exercises? Why can't they do a variety of other things? And either because you force the door open, or that door is already open to have a more thoughtful discussion, we can usually come up with lots of different ideas. I've got a set of exercises in the workbook that walk through that divergent thinking process and some ways to help break out of the box of an obvious action like going to the gym. once you have those, we want to evaluate them. And we think about it as, well, what do I want to accomplish? Is this going to be effective at that target outcome? That's the impact, right? How easy is it for, well, them? Is it likely that they would ever take this action? We're going to talk about whether they want to next. That's coming up. But is this actually something easy for them to do? It's obviously a whole lot easier to drop on the floor and do push-ups than it is to go to the gym. We look at the cost, how difficult is it for a company? And then after talking to many companies over the years, I've realized we also have to talk about fit. Some companies just don't like certain solutions, right? And so we have to honor that and honor their business approach, et cetera. So let's say you've settled on a particular action, right? And for the sake of argument here and the fact that I already have the slides ready, we're going to use going to the gym, understanding that you may come up with lots of other examples. That's a statement of what we come up with sitting in a conference room or over a Zoom meeting with others. It's not real. It's not real until we actually get in the context of someone's life and saying, is this something they want to do? Is this something that's actually possible for them? And we have a framework to help explore that context and what it means for them. The first part of this, and I mentioned this a bit at the beginning, is that often it is the smallest of steps which ironically stop people from taking action. Okay? So in the case of exercise, that might be, they may really, really want to go. They may know it's important for their lives. They may know it's important for their long-term health. Heck, they may actually feel good after exercise. But they're really, really pale. And they just don't like showing up in those gym shorts. It's stuff like that that gets in people's way. And we find that there is no universal behavior change. There just ain't such thing. Instead, we have to look at the details. We have to look at the micro behaviors, the many small things that a person has to do in order to succeed, and then see how do they feel about it at each step of the way. So those micro behaviors, that's, for example, in the case of going to the gym, right? So you have this awesome app that you sold to the company, and okay, how's this app going to get people to actually go to the gym? Let's start enumerating some of them. Okay, so, well, they have to have received the email inviting them. They have to open the email. They have to download the app. They have to, well, they're probably not downloading it right at the moment they're going to the gym, so they have to remember to open the darn thing later. They have to, they probably have to have their password. If it's a company thing, they probably want to be secure and private and all that stuff, so there's probably a password. Let me see. They, oh man, they probably have to have battery charge. They have to, well, they can't be distracted by something else right after they open it up. They have to, of course, know where the gym is. They have to have their gym clothes. They have to not feel terrible about it. They have to, do they have to have a membership first? Maybe they have to have a membership, etc. They have to have gas in the car. They have to have a map. They have to know where to go. They have to have the time available. It's a tremendous number of small things. And you can think about it as a souped up version of a journey map. In a journey map, we often do it in kind of a stylized form. Here are the big stages. This is all about the details. And in every one of those, once we've identified each of those steps, usually what I get from people as I do this exercise with teams is they'll go, wow, that's a lot. There's a lot of things that I'm asking my user to do that I wasn't even thinking about. And that's because of our own biases. Because the more familiar with it that we are, the more our minds trick us into thinking that it's easy and simple because it comes to mind so easily. And so part of this process is getting out of our own heads and writing it all out. Now I used 4 here just because for the purposes of space. I often find there are 20 little steps, each one of which could derail people. And let's look at what that means. Why would people get derailed? So why wouldn't somebody at any one of those steps not want to go? I mentioned the being afraid of how they look, right? It might be, hey, yeah, okay, I just got this message about going to the gym, but I'm watching Netflix. I'm not going to do this right now, right? It may be, oh, man, I'm just so tired. Oh, maybe I'll just eat some more potato chips. these are our human frailties. These are the things that we all suffer from, but somehow we think that our users don't. These things add up. Now, if you take the broad sweep of behavioral science and you summarize that literature of the reasons people don't take conscious action, you can summarize them with the framework CREATE: cue, reaction, evaluation, ability, timing, and experience, which is, in order for someone to take action, first, something has to cue them. They have to think about it in the first place. Often that is your biggest barrier. Your product is bloody awesome. But then again, so are about a million other things in their lives. Their kids are awesome, their friends are awesome, the new show is awesome, etc. How do you actually get their attention to think about it in the first place? Now, once you do have their attention, their minds have an immediate reaction. That's your system one, if you've read, for example, Kahneman's work. That is emotional, it's intuitive. It has nothing to do with the costs and benefits, nothing to do with the wonderful value proposition of what you offer. Instead, it's just, ugh, I don't like how I'm going to look. I don't like how people judge me when I go to the gym. That's a reaction. Now, if you can get past that, then it's your system two, your deliberative thought. What are the costs and benefits? What we have to remember here is that we don't do costs and benefits like a spreadsheet. Rather, our minds do a warped mental math that focuses on some things, not another, and that's malleable, changes given the context. If you can get past that, then a few things happen more or less simultaneously. Sense of ability. Is it something you actually have the prerequisites for? Do you have the shoes? Do you know where the gym is, etc., right? Our good old friend procrastination. Is there something else that is more pressing in your mind that you would do, right? And then experience is just a little reminder that no matter how good the product may be now, if someone has had prior experience that was negative, that made them feel bad, whether with your product or something similar, all of the rest of the funnel is tainted by that experience, and you have to overcome that. And so what this gives you is it gives you a diagnosis of, along these little steps, on the right-hand side, you write out, is there a cue? Are people going to think about this thing at all, right? What's their reaction? What's their evaluation, etc.? And it helps us diagnose where's the problem, the specific micro behavior, and the probable reason. And sometimes that reason is they don't like your product. It's not important to them, right? And that's what we have to overcome. Sometimes it's an emotional reaction, which they really are on board, which doesn't work. And often it's just simple attention. But when you identify this, now we can craft the intervention. Once you have this diagnosis of what's going on, where and why, now we can do something about it. And so let's look at crafting that intervention. Thankfully, behavioral science has a tremendous number of tools that we can use. They aren't magic wands. Say, use social proof, everyone will follow. Instead, there are a set of tools matched to the particular problems that we believe people have. If it's a problem of queuing, right, if they just don't have their attention, well, yeah, we have some techniques for that. If it's a problem of that emotional reaction, we have, etc. This summary on the screen is actually showing both what you can do to start an action as well as to stop it. Okay, I'm going to focus on starting for exercise, but in other contexts, you may need to stop, like helping somebody stop smoking. Recent research has shown that it's primarily an issue of a habit rather than an addiction. Yes, the nicotine is there, but a lot of it's just the hardwiring in the brain that says, oh, that's what the clock says, time for my smoke break. Time for my vaping, whatever it might be. And so these are techniques you can use to overcome that. But there are a tremendous number of them. Let me just go through a few of them to make this concrete. If you wanted to cue your users to think about exercise, what would you do? When do you send that alert? When do you send that email? I'm sure many of you have sent email before. Anybody not sent email? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So this is an experiment that I ran with one of the largest employers in the world. It's a large minimum wage population. And this is just a subset of the different times that we tested. Tested like a few dozen different times a day and days of week. We said, okay, we've sent emails before. We've sent important emails before. We've got to know when's the right time to do this. And in fact, if you search online, you'll find lots of people telling you when is the optimal time to send a tweet, send a message, etc. And most of it's complete crap. And the reason is this, that it actually matters immensely. This is one of the single most powerful things you can ever do, is find out when people have time. Now in this experiment, we found change a day, in fact, change a few hours. You can increase your response rate, and this was a cold email, so low overall, by a good 75%, just by changing when you're doing it. And the challenge is that despite all those wonderful claims online that you may find of how you should always send on Tuesday morning, or whatever it might be, it's different. It's about the context of the individual. It's about that qualitative and quantitative research that you did in the previous step. To understand, when did they have time? I mentioned before, this was a large minimum wage population. Many of these folks work 2 jobs. And so the time between their jobs is often Sunday night or Saturday morning when they're getting things ready, right? Didn't have any other time. I did one with one of the largest manufacturers out there. And for them, it's completely different. We went from, this one was a huge lift. It was like a 200, 300% lift. Sunday, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Weekend, absolutely nothing. Monday, yeah, a little bit. Tuesday was, in fact, for them, the best day. So often when we have a great product, we want to yell about it. We want to say, okay, I just need to get people's attention. You don't need to get anything. Instead, we look at how can we align with the structure of their time? How can we align with when they have bandwidth? Not by yelling, but by getting in the line of sight at that moment when they can pay attention. And it might be interesting for them. There are many other such techniques that you'll find in the workbook. I'm not going to go through all of them now just for the sake of time. So let's look at that emotional reaction. Let's say you do have somebody's attention, whether it is because you've aligned with the time, whether it's like many of these exercise bands or an Apple Watch, where it's something that cues them constantly, right? Then they have that system 1. Then they have that emotional reaction. What do you do? Well, this is where your social proof, your peer comparisons, etc. come in. Many of you probably have received a letter in the mail. Remember, paper goes through the mail slot, dog eats it, you throw it out. You know, that cycle repeats. So you may have actually seen one of these before your dog ate it. And this is a bill from O-Power. It's a statement from O-Power, actually, which is a $1 billion company bought out by Oracle, where all they did basically was this. They compared how much you were spending on energy to your neighbors. And if you spent less, you felt great. If you didn't, like, ah, damn it, my neighbors are spending more than my neighbors are spending less than me. What am I doing? And it just got under your skin. I study this stuff. I've run my own such test, and I still get this damn thing and I curse. It's like, oh, man. I don't know. For the record, I don't know where they get these efficient neighbors. I mean, it just drives me crazy. I'm always in the middle. It just drives me crazy. But it gets at us, right? It gets us in a way that isn't about value proposition. It isn't about this is the right thing to do morally. No, it gets at our sense of competition. It gets at what I call the yes, you can moment. Hey, other people are doing this. And a yes, you should. Wow. Other people were doing that. They're probably judging me. They're probably looking at how I'm using electricity and saying, well, I'm wasting it. They're not good, right? So it's a social pressure in this way. I ran a similar experiment in the finance space. That's the one on the left. Again, very powerful. You can read it in my writing as well as Hunt Alcott did some of the initial work with O-Power to measure their effectiveness. And they found a small effect, but a durable one over time. So people who are really motivated by this. So let's say that you have that emotional reaction, and it's either positive or neutral. You've found a way to move past it. What about the costs and benefits? Now, this is usually what we're very good at talking about. We're great at talking about how wonderful our product is. But yeah, maybe sometimes our product is really wonderful, but it's competing with all the other wonderful things. There's a technique by Kitty Milkman and others at Penn called temptation bundling. Now, their first study in this was actually in the context of going to the gym and exercising. And what they did was they bundled together a want and a should. Something that people wanted to do right now. In this case, it was listen to an audio book. They did a number of years ago, so it was an edition of the Hunger Games. With something they knew they should do. And they actually wanted to do, they just didn't want to do right now, which was exercise. So they took that audiobook. They said, you got it for free. You get this audiobook. It's locked up in the gym locker. So you've got to go to the gym and, oh, you can't actually leave with it. You've got to use it right there. And they found a nice bump in because this one was about a 12% bump in people following through and taking action and exercising, right? That's temptation bundling. Dan Ariely talks about this in one of his books as well, where he combined watching movies with something that was personally very painful for him, taking some shots. And that's one way to bring together the near-term facets with the longer-term benefit. We're all naturally focused on the present benefits. And so even if your product is wonderful, but it helps people a week later, that's really hard. This is a way to combine that and help people focus on what's going on right now and bundle together the good and the necessary. Here's a study that we ran on opt-outs, or in this case, opt-in boxes. Thankfully, the US and much of the rest of the world is moving from a place where we simply spam people with communications to one where we ask them, hey, do you want our information? Now, unless you're tricking people, most people look at this box and say, heck no. I'm not even going to read this thing. I know what that box looks like. I'm not going to click this thing because they're going to spam me. The problem is that's a system one reaction. That's what we saw before, right? That's an immediate gut. No, I'm not going to do this. But some people may actually really benefit. And more importantly, some people may actually want what you have to offer. So how do you change that? You intentionally move it to a system two. You intentionally add friction. So Leon Zhang on my team developed this, where he changed that box. Nothing like this looks like one of those check boxes. So on the left, he just put a little drop down that said, hey, do you want our email? Yes, no. It slowed people down just enough that they actually read it and said, okay, some of them wanted it, some of them didn't. Cool, no problem. But those who did want it clicked yes, rather than simply skipping the whole thing. And then it allowed them to personalize, hey, okay, I'd like this information, I don't want this information, etc. And again, gave them the option of none. And this is intentionally creating that evaluation where otherwise it would be a quick reaction. Oh yeah, the punchline, 500% increase. Bloody awesome. Yeah, it was an amazing, amazing intervention that he did. And all of the studies I'm talking about, by the way, are randomized control trials, simultaneous randomly selected groups from a larger population, randomly assigned to either treatment or control arm, okay? or to different versions of an intervention. So all of the studies I'm talking about. And so Leon's was great, which is it's not tricking people. It's a way to just slow people down and ask, okay, do you actually want this? And there are many, many such examples. There's a great one in the insurance space where people were asked, hey, do you want this? Do you want insurance? It'll help you protect your family. And another version they tested was, do you want insurance? It's not going to be that hard to sign up for. As we as the product developers might think, or as the marketers might think, okay, yeah, we got to talk about the benefits. There's actually a huge lift just from saying it's not gonna take long. Because the facet that matters to your users may not be the one that you focus on. And again, our minds do a warped mental calculus. Sometimes we focus on the costs, sometimes we focus on the benefits, sometimes we focus on the near term rather than long term. And part of that discovery process, understanding the context, exploring the context of the individual, is seeing what matters to them and trying to check our understanding and what matters to us at the door. They're saying, hey, it really doesn't matter what I care about. It matters what my users are looking for and how I can deliver that for them. Now, there are many other different techniques that we can use to help people know that they will succeed, to have that self-efficacy, as well as actually have the gym clothes, et cetera, where they might be, to overcome issues of procrastination and to overcome issues of experience. And I'm happy to answer if people are looking for, if they have particular challenges, address those during the Q&A. But next, I want to skip ahead to, okay, you've picked your intervention. You've identified what you want, step one. You've figured out what's going on in their lives, step two. You've identified an intervention. You've crafted something that can help them, step three. Now you're ready to build it. I'm not going to tell you how to write code. I'm not going to tell you how to build an email. But I do want to talk about that ethical check before we build. Before I do that, I want to just quickly stop for questions. So Robin, would you mind opening it up? See if there are any questions right now?
Sure, yeah, actually, the way we're running it is the if you open the chat box, we'll keep that open throughout the talk. Messages you put there will go straight to the hosts to see, and so we can then select some questions to pose to Steve. Steve, are you able to see the questions that are?
I sure can. Yep.
You can. All right. So you'll see there's one question currently, and hoping others want to contribute something.
Okay.
Feel free to.
So I'll give it a little second while I drink some water here. 1 second, guys. So as you all fetch up. All right. So we've talked about that. What is behavioral science for those of you who might not be familiar? I know Robin, of course, has a long series of these, so that may be maybe something that you've already come across. I always just want to fill that in for those who don't. And then we've talked about this common approach. Again, with an understanding that I use the acronym DECIDE. You don't have to. You can use a modified version of the Double Diamond from the Design Council. It's a great tool. Ideas 42 has a nice framework. Matt Wallard has a nice one with the intervention design process, etc. In the end, we're all using similar tools. A hypothesis of what's going on in someone's life, right? Or, sorry, a hypothesis about how we think we can achieve a meaningful outcome. And then a diagnosis that looks at what's going on in their lives, etc. Okay. Any questions right now? Okay, I will need that. I'll let folks, why don't I let folks type some stuff in, and then I will keep on going in the meantime, and I'll just check back with that. Okay. So
there are a couple there, but we might want
to. Are they? Yeah. Then there's something wrong, because I just looked and I didn't see a one.
Okay, then they're then the way they're coming through may be visible only to me. So,
you want to read them out?
Sure. So we've got a question here. Is this seems to align to BJ Fogg's model? What's unique and what's common?
Sure. So it depends which aspect of BJ Fogg's model. So tiny habits, do you mean, or do you mean the MAT, which is the motivation, ability, and training?
Yeah, he's referring to MAT. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I have great respect for BJ. I actually did his knew him, and he wrote the foreword to the first edition of my book as well. It's different in a variety of ways. So first, it's an understanding that he focuses in particular on a hot trigger that in the MAT, in motivation, ability, and trigger. The motivation, he says, largely irrelevant, right? And it really has to do with decreasing the frictions and letting people take action in that moment. And I think that's exactly right. It's just there's often more to it. There's more to it in two ways. One is motivation does matter. Incentives matter. Our sense of self-determination, whether we feel in control of the moment, those things matter, right? And so I try to widen the aperture. And the other is I try to look at the differences between a conscious, effortful choice to do something, which is the full create cue. Oh, and actually, I should say that the trigger for him is sort of like a cue, but I think it's a little bit narrower in how he thinks about it. But to be fair, he also wrote his a long time ago, right? Over 10 years ago, he was doing the MAT. I had the benefit to learn from him, right? And I've had the benefit to learn from Ideas 42 and so many others to synthesize this. So when I say it's narrower, it's not because I'm anything special. It's rather because I'm just later in the second edition of this book. My first one was much narrower as well. So that's part. The other is we've learned a lot about the spectrum of behaviors and decision-making. And so on the one end, we have conscious decision-making, which goes through that full create, right, in order for someone to take action. On the other side is a fully automated behavior, a habit, okay, which for the purpose of taking action is only the cue, the reaction, and the ability. The rest doesn't matter, right? You have to get their attention. That triggers the routine. If that is the R in this case, and then they go ahead and take action. We didn't talk about as much until later on in Tiny Habits is how you start forming that. And I think Wendy Wood has the best research there to understand it. Is constant repetition. A reward is useful, but it's not at all necessary, right? And a lot of the authors in the field talk about the reward side. But there are also a lot more in the middle. There's the richness of social science that talks about our identities and our sense of self and our intuitive responses. That I think you'll find, again, just as a broadening of the different types of behaviors that I try to look at. So I hope that's useful. And again, PJ does great work. So I'm not critiquing that. I'm just, I've had the benefit of learning from him, as well as many others. So there was one question that came through here that to me, I think it depends on who they send it to, whether it's to owner or you. So for me, I got one that said, in addition to creating friction of the example given, what are some other ways to push a decision into system 2? So Jack Soll, Katie Milkman, and one other author I don't remember the name of, have a great guide to debiasing. Okay, and you'll find this in the book. I talk about this. There are a couple different big approaches that people use. The ways that you remove many of the mistakes, so we'll put it, the shortcuts that can go awry in our minds, is you either intentionally slow people down, okay? So friction, raising the stakes, adding supervision, right? All of these make us more conscious in the moment. Removing familiar triggers. So making it an unfamiliar situation, making it harder to read, for example, that's another example of adding a subtle type of friction. Those are all ways to push into a system 2, right? That's the one bucket that Katie and Jack and others talk about. The other big bucket is tools that make it easier to make the right choice, which is often people are going to make a quick decision and you don't even try. Hey, thank you. Oh, John Payne, thank you. Thank you, Sean. So there are a lot of these authors. So John Payne's work. No, actually, there was another author, Jack Soll. It's not just John Payne. There was another one. Soll was another author on that one. So I think that may not be the right reference. Sorry. The other big bucket is tools. Those are decision-making tools. Those are things like a grid that helps you make a clear decision. This is your checklist for pilots, etc., which walk you through all the steps. And those are the two big buckets of how you address this. I'm getting a few more. Knowing the target seems critical. What are some tips to defining or describing the right target audience? So cool. Thank you, David. I've got a few techniques to use in the workbook. Let me just walk through some for you. Sometimes you're just going to be given the actor, right? Who is it we're trying to serve? Sometimes it's much more open-ended, and I would say in both cases, it behooves us, it helps to take a step back and say, who might use this, right? Who might benefit from this? In this part and in general, I find that if we're dealing with a hard problem, if we're dealing with something that people have struggled with before, if we're called in to do behavioral design, it means that that actor, that action, that outcome, that comes to mind so easily, it's probably wrong. And it's probably our minds tricking us because of our own availability bias. The thing that comes to mind easily, oh, okay, well, I am going to develop this exercise app. Okay, well, I want to help overweight people. That's obvious. Or I'm going to develop this exercise app. Oh, it's going to be running. I'm going to get fit young people. And your mind very quickly narrows onto the prototypical image of that person, right? The archetype. Or, to make it a little clearer, the stereotype of that person. And in our mind, is that runner black or white? In our mind, is that overweight person a heavyset woman in her 50s? And so we have to break out of these easy, quick models. And the mantra I use here is that the obvious is our enemy. The thing that comes to mind so quickly is almost always wrong. And the reason is not because it's necessarily the wrong thing to do ever. It's because if we're called in, it's because all those other obvious things have already been tried. And we need to do something better. And so one of the exercises that we do is, so for example, when the actor, as you asked about the audience, you write down who that obvious actor is, the heavyset woman in her 50s. And then you say, okay, what are 3 more that aren't her, that are completely different? What is a radical persona? What is one that just feels like, oh yeah, what's a little twist on this? And you're forcing your mind to check other boxes, to think through other examples. If you're familiar with Edward de Bono, he has some great tools for, who's the guy who coined the term lateral thinking, to think of other creative solutions. One of which he uses is take out a dictionary. Yes, remember those paper things? They did exist once. Take out a dictionary. You could probably do it at the digital version, just not as cool. Flip to a random page, pick a word, and in this case, determine an audience that's related to that word. It forces you out of the obvious. An example of lateral thinking. He does, and the thinking hats are to critique it from different perspectives, right? So forcing your mind to do exercise, to think about it from a critical way, think about it in a supportive way, etc. Right? So those are some tools. Sorry, David, I love this stuff. So I think that was probably a much longer answer than you expected. My apologies. I really love this stuff. Okay. So I see there are lots more questions, and now people are sending them to me directly. Thank you. And I can read them. That's cool. But let me just move on to the final section, and then we'll have some more time in the end. I try always to mention the ethics of behavioral science in every talk. It's not sexy. Most people then say, okay, I'm not going to buy your book. I get that. That's fine. I still do it because I think it's really important for us. I think it's important for all of us to succeed. Okay? And so I'm going to start with the assumption. That's really cool. Okay, I have to say this. Amy, let me connect you with the Busara Center. So this is somebody who's in Kenya. Thank you for joining, by the way. Working in the Global South. Oh, okay, you already work in Busara. Busara is excellent. But let's communicate offline. I've been to Kenya a number of times. It's a wonderful place. Happy to talk with you about some interventions there as well. So, but let's get back to the final section, which is the ethics of behavioral science. I'm going to start with the understanding that you're all good people who want to do something for your users, want to do something for your company, etc. And that you've probably gone out on the web and seen Netflix auto forward to the next movie. And usually that's fine because it's really cool, unless of course it's 3 a.m. You're like, oh, I already did it. Okay, fine. Or you've probably seen Google, and you may not even noticed, you may not have even seen it, trick you into giving up your location data. They're doing it all around the world, right? Even though there are regulations specifically aimed at stopping Google from doing that and capturing your detailed every movement of your life and then storing it and then selling it, right? You probably noticed roach motels where, you know, you get into the site, you get into the product, and there's just no way out, right? It's trying to capture you in this world. And you're like, oh man, I just wanted to look for this thing. I don't want to hear about all your other dang products. I just want to find the thing I'm looking for. Harry Brignull has put together many of these in a site called Dark Patterns. Some of you have probably seen that. It is awesome. And the term roach motel comes from him. He has a variety of these. And he's been talking about the abuses, especially in digital products, for a long time. And sadly, we don't have to look far to find these. And a reckoning is coming that we have earned. We have articles about Google tricking people to give up their privacy, despite laws directly aimed at them not doing this, right? And those reviews specifically talk about the nudges, talks about the use of behavioral science, talks about the tricks that people use. You may have seen, there have been a series of great articles in the New York Times about Uber, of its behavioral science team, which was discontinued last year. But before they were discontinued, they worked on the problem of how to get drivers to drive longer. You know, and it didn't really matter if they weren't taking bathroom breaks. Didn't really matter if they were tired. Instead, it was about how you maximize growth for the company. Even though, hey, that's dangerous for the driver, it's dangerous for the passenger, right? For all of us. If you think back to Facebook when it wasn't evil, I know it's hard, I know that. But one of the first kinks in the armor for Facebook was when they came out with a study on the bottom left, changing the news feed. And remember, this was the start of a real change in, at least in American society, as we looked at the big technology companies very differently. And we looked at them differently because of how they were using psychology of product design, and in some cases specifically behavioral science. And so, yeah, they just manipulated the feeds. They did it with an academic partner at somebody who previously was at Cornell and moved on. And they saw if they could make people sad, you know, including depressed people, including suicidal people, just anybody. See if they can make them sad, see if they can make them happy. From a research perspective, it's fascinating, except for that little problem that a lot of folks who could have been hurt by that. We looked more recently at ThreadUp, a great company who, you know, they talked about their products, talked about how Brittany had just saved money on this. Abigail just bought this wonderful dress. Everyone's excited, brooding in this social pressure, except of course it was complete crap. There was no such thing. It was an algorithm in the background, making up people's names, making up sales in order to pressure folks into buying stuff they didn't need. And there are sadly many, many of these examples. Again, Dark Patterns has a compendium of these. You can find people talking about and shaming some of the companies doing this. But the challenge is that, well, so many companies are doing this. It's not a small subset. It's not a tiny group. And this reckoning is real. Even in our Congress, there is a bipartisan bill to ban this crap, to stop the use of behavioral experiments. And they use that term, right? And they do it, they limit it in the current draft, at least what I saw of the Detour Act. They limit it to very large technology companies. And fine, but you change one digit in that bill and it becomes applicable to almost all the major technology companies out there and any of us who are trying to help their users. And so we have some very angry senators who are looking at what's going on in the field, looking at what Google's doing, looking at what Facebook's doing, looking at what Netflix, et cetera, is doing, and saying they have to put this to a stop. They're doing it in a ham-handed way, to be perfectly honest. But that don't matter. If it's illegal, it's going to be illegal. And so we need to engage. We need to self-regulate before someone else does. Or someone else does it in a ham-handed way that just says, you can no longer run A/B tests in your product. Because that's a conceivable outcome of this. No more A/B tests. Yep, you just can't test your products because that's manipulative. I think that's crazy. But I also recognize the shady stuff that's going on in our field. Now, I also want to be clear that it's not just our field. We're not the first to face these, right? So Cialdini, when he was doing research for his very effective and thoughtful book, Persuasion, he became a car salesman, actually, and he studied their tricks. He studied the gulags of North Korea and how they broke people and remade them. He studied door-to-door salesmen. He studied, well, business as it exists all around the world. That there are many, many different places that face these ethical challenges. It ain't just behavioral science. And now the design community has been grappling with this, and I think very thoughtfully, for a long time. This is an essay from Milton Glaser called The Road to Hell, looking at the gradations of self-deception and how we can develop a product that first is awesome, looks great, and eventually, just step by step, is actually going to hurt a person who might actually kill them. Now, this is, of course, intentionally it shows the extremes. But then also, in the community, people look at how we can follow this path. How we can just go one step more and it doesn't feel too bad, doesn't feel too bad, doesn't feel too bad. And so while we're not unique in facing this, any business always faces questions of, is this product really right for all of my users, not just the ones who speak up and say it's great for them? Or consultants, as I've been in the past, always face this challenge with, is it right to take this client? What we have to add is not ethics of behavioral science. What we can add are the behavioral science of ethics. This isn't well known, sadly, in our field, but there's a body of work specifically about ethics and how our environments affect our ethical behavior. Dan Ariely wrote a book that summarized his and many others in the field. As far as I can tell, it's his least popular book. And in my opinion, it is by far the most important. Where he looks at how all great deceptions start with self-deception. How we want to feel good about ourselves. You meet very, very few people who think they are doing bad. There are some of those, right? But most of us, and I do use the first person, plural, most of us, we think we're pretty good, not perfect, pretty good. And, you know, we just, yeah, okay, we did some things, fine, but on the whole, it netted out, we're okay. Or, I mean, you use some trite examples like, yeah, okay, fine, we took some stuff from work. They had a lot of it, right? I needed it at home, it's not a big deal. Right? Or, you know, I took this project. It's not the greatest project in the world, but I needed it in order to open that door so I could do some really great stuff. Or, man, yeah, okay, so I may have made a trade that I shouldn't have on inside information about this company that we knew through a consulting relationship. Look, that information was out there. Some other asshole was going to go trade on that, and they were going to take all these folks' money. I wasn't hurting them. I'm just taking it from that other guy. There are so many ways in which we can lie to ourselves. And Dan and Kwame Appiah has a great book, Experiments in Ethics, that talk about the longer history outside of Dan and others' work about these experiments and how in one condition we can say, no, that's not right. I won't do that. And another, it just happens. We do it. And so what we learn from this literature is that we can change our ethical context. In other words, we can apply behavioral science on ourselves. It's not about a checklist. That's important. Yes, you do need an ethical checklist that says this is good, this is bad. But most of us can do that drinking a beer and sitting back for a few minutes. That's not hard. The hard part is following it. And it's not because we're bad people. It's rather because we're good, well-intentioned people who lie to ourselves. And so how do we stop that? Well, bright red lines. You remove ambiguity. That's removing the fudge factor, as Ariely talks about. You get an independent review board, especially people who don't like you. That's your goal. Get people who are contrary, who are hostile to what you're trying to do. They're the best ones to give a review. Set up a feedback loop so that when you are straying, you can very quickly see it. And it isn't a year down the line where like, what have I done? What have I done to my career? What have I done to myself? Right? We talk about this stuff publicly and we set social commitments. You may notice that I'm doing that myself right now. I'm making it harder for me to stray. Because if I do, you all are going to flame me. And it would be well warranted. Bring it on. Right? We set up norms. We change our reference group. So we look at those shining examples of designers, of product managers, of marketers who said no. And we don't watch all the other ones in the back room who say, man, I just got away with this crap. Right? We set our own reference group. We, again, apply behavioral science to ourselves. That's what we have unique to add. We struggle with the same problems as everyone else. We're just as human as anyone else. But I think our body of research and our understanding of what allows people to take action, what stops them, right? Those interventions we were talking about before, that can help us perhaps do a little bit better. And that's the ethical side. There's obviously a lot more to it, but I just wanted to introduce that idea of behavioral science in ourselves. And so if I can quickly wrap up, people face a gap. I do, you do, most importantly, our users do. Between what they want to do, maybe what they want to do 5 years down the line, what they're just not focused on right now, and what they actually do right now. Companies all around the world, nonprofits, organizations all around the world are applying behavioral science to help fix this problem. To the benefit of their companies, absolutely making a profit, nothing wrong with that, and to help their users overcome these challenges. I summarize that approach with the acronym DECIDE, but there are many such frameworks. In the end, what we're all doing is behavioral problem solving, learning about what we want to do, learning about what the user wants to do, finding the intersection, trying it out in the field, and evaluating what to do next in an iterative fashion. Behavioral science has a tremendous toolkit that can help us do this. To start an action, whether that's narrating someone's past and helping them think about how this is natural for them, a natural extension of what they've done before. Whether it's your standard peer comparison that you've seen from OPower, from Hellwall, from lots of other places. And also that we can use to help stop bad actions, things that they want to stop doing. Whether that might be a competing product and they want to use yours. whatever it might be, whether it might be stopping them from smoking. There are ways that we can help with this. But it all comes from our understanding of the user and the very specific problems they have in a specific moment. Because there is no behavioral change in general, no such thing. It comes from good quality user research and understanding our folks. And while we're just as human as anyone else, and we struggle with the same ethical challenges, we can apply behavioral science to our own environments to help us do slightly better. Not to be perfect, we're never going to be perfect. But so that the reason we get into this field, the reason we get so excited, so passionate about doing awesome stuff that goes and helps people and helps our businesses succeed, so that we don't stray from that path. As I mentioned, there's a great deal more in the guide. It is free. Now, the book is awesome. You should buy the book. Everybody's buying the book. But the workbook covers most of it. So if it's a money issue or you're not sure, get the workbook. It's free. It covers all of these exercises, and it actually summarizes what's in the core ideas from the book itself. And with that, I just want to take some more time and answer any questions you might have. Thank you, David. That's very kind. Oh, yeah. Electric use is made up. So another person gave an example of some other fake testimonials. All right, why don't you, Robin, do you want to read out some of the questions you have there?
Sure, I will. Yeah, and just to be clear for everyone, the workbook, there were some questions on where to download it. It is at now it is at the top of the screen here, just in case it got blurred in the black at the top. So.
Oh, sorry. Yes, behavioral technology. Also, by the way, if you want to reach out to me, there's a form there. If you want a training in this stuff, there's a form there. I do some very limited consulting. I do have a day job, but I do some consulting as well, and happy to help if I can. Okay. So, other questions?
Sure. We have Brian Kugelman's question. Did you see that for policy? How can we depend on politicians to stop the use of dark patterns? This is basically for them themselves to stop using it when most of the same techniques are used in political campaigns and in daily rhetoric.
Yeah,
here, let me unmute you, Brian, quickly do you have that option?
Hey, Brian. Oh, you're on mute, Brian, but you're very expressive.
Oh,
there we go. Now you're on, Brian. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, wonderful presentation first off. But
thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I was following. I remember when you sent out the link in LinkedIn about the policy initiative, but I worked in government and very close to politics for a long time. And, I think that they're often just as bad as like the worst companies out there, if not more. Like Cambridge Analytica was all, that was all politicians using psych ops techniques. So I think, when it comes to passing policy reform, you have a lot of very good, honest politicians, but not everyone in the mix, I think, are the guardians of ethics. So how are we going to...
Brian, really? Such skepticism. Come now.
I spent too much time in social change. So
no, it's a good question. I actually I had a political consulting company myself, and I share your view of those of us in politics. So there's a beautiful thing that politicians do, which is they regulate other people's behavior, but not their own.
Yes.
So, for example, I know you're in Toronto, but in the U.S. We have this do not call list, which you can register for, and it's illegal to call, of course, unless you're a politician, and then it's perfectly fine. And the type of regulation we're going to see will be to ban private companies. And unless you happen to work for a politician's office, that applies to you.
Okay, yeah.
And probably nonprofits as well. So that's the challenge. It's not a measure of moral superiority. It's rather there are enough abuses and enough people pissed off with what's going on that yes, politicians respond. Sometimes because they're really good people. There are a few out there, and sometimes because they want to keep their jobs. Right? And that means responding to people who are very angry about what Google's doing, what Facebook's doing, etc. and we all get tied up in that same mess. So,
Hey,
has that answered your question, Brian?
I'm satisfied.
That's good. I will try my best. I share your skepticism about humanity as well as politics, in maybe a different category. Okay, hey, here's one. Have you looked at readiness to change? So trans-theoretical model, stages of change. Yes, absolutely. So studied a lot of the different models out there. Stages of change has a big following to it, especially in health. Again, I find that it's a bit narrow. So it analyzes a particular type of behavior change, which is intentional, deliberate, and slow. And when you're looking, for example, at eating healthier, sometimes you eat healthier because there's healthy food in front of you. You don't have to go through a multi-month process of saying, am I ready to eat a veggie burger? Sometimes you do, but not always. And I think one of the great lessons of behavioral science is that the moment matters. And BJ Fogg also really focuses on this. The moment matters. Are all the conditions in that moment right? Even if somebody hasn't been thinking about it for a long time, you may get a spark in that moment when somebody changes. And that's not something that really fits into the stages of change. And that's because it's trying to solve a different problem, I think. Robin, I think do you disagree with that? Was that a ho humming on the TTM?
I think that was good. I think it was good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Okay. What are some of the most effective nudges down funnel to obtain the desired submit button press, in your opinion? Well, first, I would ask, I don't know, do people want your product? That's always the first place to start. Behavioral science builds on top of incentives. If the right incentives aren't there, usually what we're doing won't work, and even if it could, we shouldn't be. So that's number one. But overall, so let's say somebody actually cares about what you're doing, and they want it. Can they see the submit button? Sometimes it's that simple, right? Good design matters. Is the page beautiful? Does it convey a sense of professionalism? If it's in a professional context, right? We have context-dependent social norms on what's professional and what's appropriate for a group. Is it after multiple clicks? All of that stuff, standard stuff. But in the visual, you look at the F-shaped pattern, you look at some stuff that Stephen Anderson does a really good discussion of this in his book, Seductive Interaction Design, about some of those kind of final step interventions in design. So he talks about lots of other things, but he covers that quite well. So that would be my response there. Thank you, David. Very kind comment. Okay, I can't tell which of these I've gotten and which ones are there. Any others there, Robin, that you have? And the rest I'll just take over email.
I do have one here.
Okay.
Chris Schluterman, you weren't able to post your question, so I'm going to offer you to unmute here, and you can go ahead and voice it.
Go for it. Go, Chris.
Let me get to the file.
The file. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I've been working on this, and I'm gonna have Alex. I wasn't ready to have Alex read this. Let me find it.
Sure, no worries. And also, if you can.
Here we go. Ready. Here we go.
Okay, great. Go for it.
File. Speech. Do you hear that?
I hear nothing. No.
All right.
You might have to just give us a quick summary if you don't mind.
All right, never mind. Sorry, it's not going to work.
Next. Code Next is Austin's attempt to re-quantify to how it will develop in the long-term future.
Forget me.
The development of the city. All
I haven't
cities and
figured
future
out how to do
cities
this
cannot
yet.
depend on the motivation.
I figured out how to write it, but that's about it.
Oh, okay. Why don't you send me an email? You can reach out via steve@behavioraltechnology.co, and I'm happy to take a look and see if I can help. With that, I know we have extended beyond an hour. I think I have a little bit more time for Q&A, but I try to keep it as close as I can to an hour when I can. So I just wanted to thank you all. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for engaging. And thank you for your work. Thank you for trying to apply behavioral science, whether you're new to the field or whether you've been doing this for a long time, to help people take action and do something different in their lives. It's an awesome field, and I'm glad to have all of you in it as well.
Steve, thank you so much. Fascinating as always, and just so excited to exciting all the new revisions and new view and everything that that's come out of the recent research. Your new book is excellent. Highly recommend. Steve shows his humility, which he rightfully encourages all of us to have. That would be my #1 takeaway and encouragement for all of you as well. But I want to encourage you to ignore his humility on one point. Don't just download the workbook. Go buy his book and give it the time to study, and it will be worth your while. So again, this was an event for the Action Design Network. This was an event for the local Austin chapter. Steve is the founder of the international group. We also have Matthew Ray, the president of our International Action Design Network, on the line. Give a wave quick, Matthew. And we are opening chapters in cities around the world. So if you know people in other cities who would love to hear more and learn more on a monthly basis, I encourage them to reach out. The place to go would be to Action. I'm going to post it in the chat box here. And hopefully this goes out to everyone in the meeting. This is the website for the group. So you can find job listings there. You can find resources there. You can find links to various cities in case you have friends in other cities who may want to see what's happening locally there, or whether they want to start one there. All kinds of options. And also, if you are interested in our local group, in volunteering, in speaking, in sponsoring, please go ahead and send us a message at this address, inquiries@actiondesignatx.com. And we'd look forward to setting you up. Next month, we have another amazing talk. We always meet every 4th Monday, 6:30 to 8:30. To make it very easy, you can just set it in your calendar, put a link to our Meetup page, and just have it a recurring event. And you can get guaranteed stimulation month after month after month. And if you keep at it, someday you might know as much as Steve. No, probably not, but you can try.
Much more, very quickly. So, hey, one very important thing, okay? Yes. Robin is giving a talk on Thursday, which you all should join. Robin, can you tell them about it now that I've forced you to?
Yes. So Action Design Network has just now, we're beginning to do international events as well. So meetups that are for the global audience. And the first one will be on this Thursday. And I'm feeling very grateful to get to be this first presenter. We'll be speaking an encore performance of what we did locally last month on designing for COVID-19. So here in the behavioral science and behavioral design community in general, mobilized surprisingly quickly to address COVID. And also here at Live Neuron, we were asked by our clients to jump on helping them adapt and deal with the new challenges that COVID-19 brought upon all of us. And so we'll be sharing how you too can think about whatever work it is that you're doing, to look at it through a perspective, a behavioral design perspective, on how your audience has changed in significant ways since then and what you can do about that. So we'll be doing that talk on Thursday at 5:30. I'm watching you, Matt, to nod. 5:30 Eastern. 5:30 Eastern. So check the best place to find. You can follow Action Design ATX on all of our channels. We'll be promoting it there, as well as putting up a Meetup page for it. but you can find Action Design on Action Design Network. On all of their social posts, our channels are promoting it, as we'll be doing that locally. So it'll be really good, and there'll be more new stuff. Even if you attended last month, a lot has happened since then, and it's been much refined. So I look forward to that.
As do I. As do I. So there are a couple questions about the slides in the video. I'm happy to share those. Robin, we can post them up somewhere.
Okay.
Either on behavioral technology or on the Action Design site, where people can access both. I'd be happy to do that.
Excellent. All right. Well, so we will be sharing those. And also shout out to Alan May, Wave, and Sparky Whitty, Wave, our longtime co-hosts. Alan going almost all the way back to the beginning of Action Design ATX 6-7 years ago, without which this all wouldn't be possible. So thanks, Steve, for another amazing talk. And thanks everyone for attending tonight and sharing some of your precious time with us. Everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and stay ethical.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye, Al.